So, your brand new book is Black Sheep, and there are so many elements within the story that I want to talk about. But to begin with, as this is centered around religion and a cult, how do you define the difference between a religion and a cult?
How many Hulu documentaries there are about it? If there's more than one Hulu documentary, it's probably a cult. That's my definition, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I think there's been a fair few documentaries about a guy called Jesus Christ, so that could be.
Listen, you said it, not me. That's on you.
Yeah. No, I've been thinking about the distinction between a religion and a cult, and I mean one could make the argument that all religions are a cult, but not all cults are religions. What do you think about that?
I think that's valid. To be I'm very I have a lot of respect for people who find religion and are happy in religion, and I think um, you know, this book is less a commentary on religion than it is about belief. And I think it's interesting to see the book described as a cult book because in some ways it is a bit culty, but I never saw Black Sheep as a cult book. It's kind of easier to pitch it that way, but I don't see it as a cult book. I don't think the book is about a cult,
Right,
even though
and
there's
it's
kind
so
of a cult in
also.
it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also about family and fractured relationships and navigating like your relationship with your parents, navigating the idea of whether you will or won't become your
Yeah.
parent, sometimes quite literally, other times, in terms of other characteristics. So I want to talk about that as well as religion, but we're not done with religion just yet. So I want to know, did you grow up in a religious household? And what are your personal beliefs regarding religion and the supernatural or lack thereof?
So I was raised Catholic. I wasn't raised in a intensely religious household, but I did grow up going to church. I made my confirmation in the Catholic Church. Um, so after I was confirmed in the church, I kind of stopped going back. I had an experience when I was between, I think, around 10 years old. I befriended a classmate who went to a Christian church. I forget the denomination, but it was very different than the Catholic church that I went to, which was kind of like sit down, sit still, like don't make any sound when you're not supposed to. And at her church, it was like we're standing on the pews, we're waving our hands, we're all singing, we're like speaking in tongues. There was a teen scene, and we were preteens, but we could go, and there was like blow up couches, this was like late 90s, so that was very cool. Um, but that church got into some trouble because it was pretty intense. There was pictures of the crypt keeper in the bathroom that said like Satan is watching you, and then they put on the this around Halloween they put on a hell house, which they advertised as a haunted house, but was actually a play about how if you drank, had sex, or did drugs, you're going to hell. And a lot of local teens came thinking it was a haunted house and left traumatized and went home and told their parents, and the church got in trouble. So I had this kind of like formative experience being in that church that I was going to with my friend, and that affected me pretty deeply at the time, and I kind of carried it with me. And so I'm not currently religious, and but I do believe in ghosts. I do believe in the supernatural. Um, I've had a few experiences, and I I I wish I could put my faith in something bigger than me. I don't. I'm kind of not able to do that. I'm As much as I do believe in ghosts and things like that, I am ultimately a skeptic. So I don't know. I believe there's more to the world than what we can see, but uh, as far as a god, if he exists, please forgive me. But I'm 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 dubious.
Right. Well, I think as well, if God exists, then God will be wholly different than any of the mainstream or indeed minor religions have portrayed God. I think God won't be as we've imagined him or them or I God is God. Like God is so outside if God exists our human conception. But Bob knows that I'm going to go here. Bob knows as soon as you said it. You said that you've had a number of supernatural
Mm.
experiences. So I want to know about them. I want to know about all of them in as much detail as you're prepared to give.
Well, the one story that I tell, and I can't remember. I know I've told it before, but I can't remember when or where. But the I always like I would feel presences, and I would feel like I would walk into a space and I would feel a shift, or I would always have these feelings, but I kind of just dismiss them. And then when I was between my sophomore and junior year at college, I got an apartment in Beacon Hill in Boston, which is a very old neighborhood. And my two best friends sublet an apartment up the street. And I was they weren't in the apartment for some reason. I was staying in their apartment, and I was asleep on the couch, and there was a long hallway to the kitchen. And I was like half asleep, and I kind of, as I was dozing off, I saw a man in the kitchen, and I kind of like jolted awake, and there was nobody there. And I was like, all right. And I went back to sleep. And then a week or two later, I was sitting in the kitchen, and I felt like there was a man over my shoulder. Like, just, I just had this crazy sense, like out of nowhere, that there's a man over, like, standing behind me. And it wasn't like a malevolent presence. It was just like a very, like, I just had this moment of just like, oh, there's a guy behind me, even though there wasn't. And I mean, I've had senses like this happens to me a lot where I'll just be like, oh, there's a woman there, or there's somebody out the side. Like, I think that a lot of the time. But so I thought, oh, there's a guy behind me. And then throughout the summer, I kept feeling it. Like, I would just have these moments where I was like, there's a guy behind me. And I realized it was the same spot where I saw the man as I was falling asleep. But I didn't say anything to my friends because one, my two best friends who lived in that apartment, one is very woo woo and would be fine with it, but the other is like very easily freaked out. And if I said anything, she would have a tough time. So I was like, I'll just keep my mouth shut. And my friend, who's kind of woo woo spiritual, her doorway was right by the kitchen table where I would sit. And so this went on all summer, where I would just be sitting there and I would feel him there. And he didn't feel like, it just was kind of pleasant. Like, it just like, it felt like a nice presence. And got to the end of the summer. And I was like, all right, I'm getting like they were moving out of the sublet. I was like, I'm going to say something. Worst that happens is they're like, you're crazy. But they were both in the kitchen, and I said, and I felt him, and I was like, you have a ghost, right? And my one friend who's easily scared was like, oh. And my woo woo friend is like, oh yeah, the guy who stands in my door, he likes you. And I was like, oh, I never said anything about where I sensed the ghost, that it was a man, that I felt like it was like just out of nowhere said that. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, I don't think I'm wrong to believe that there's like when I'm feeling these presences, it's not me being like it's not out of nowhere. It's not me being like crazy or anything like that. Like could be something to it. So I think it would after having these experiences, I think it would be like wrong for me to be like, there's no such thing as ghosts. Like, I don't, I'm more certain that there's energies and ghosts and things that linger than I am about like a giant cloud man, you know?
But when she said he likes you, did you follow up on this? Like, I'm
I
not
think
just
I
gonna
was just
nod and be
like,
like, "Oh, okay, cool." I'm gonna be like, "What do you mean? How do you know? Do
I
you
think
talk to him?"
I was sort of just like, I think she was just like, yeah, he stands in my doorway. Like, I see him sometimes. Yeah, he likes you. Like, it was just like, I think she had the same sense that I did. Like, I think her experience, and I haven't talked to her about it in a long time. And I don't think, like, it was probably at the time was just like, ah. Like, just kind of so shocked by her response that I didn't really follow up. But I think she's also very, like, just kind of senses stuff. And, like, I mean, she's like, I learned how to read tarot because I went to college in Boston and we go to Salem all the time. But like she would like read auras and stuff. And so she was kind of just like the same level of like open to spirits. And I think there's a lot of stories about like kids seeing ghosts. I think you have to be
Mm.
open to if you immediately dismiss and shut down experiences, I don't think you're going to have them. But I think if you're too anxious to have them, you're not going to have them either. Um, or you'll manifest things that aren't there. I think it just needs to be that kind of like peaceful openness. But I don't know. I'm not like ghost hunting on the weekends or anything, but if I like walk into a space and I sense a ghost or sense like I believe in energies, like energy exists, we create it, roams around. So that stuff I believe in.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you said that you hadn't talked to her in a while, an idea just like snapped in my head, and it was like, what if you did? And she said he misses you.
If she,
Or okay, so and that's creepy as shit. But it could have been you need to come back.
oh yeah,
That's even creepier.
that would be a
Um,
good story.
yeah, and it was like, and that's how my mind thinks. It's like I haven't talked to her in a while, and I'm like, well, what if you did?
What if? Yeah.
What if you did? Yeah. So that I mean I don't know. That's some creepy. This the presence thing. That reminds me of my night terrors that I have. It's always the shadow people, and it's always somebody who's standing like in a doorway or something like that. And
Mm.
so that reminded me of that. I'm probably going to have a night terror now, but
Well,
that's
this guy was nice. He like it felt like a young. I don't know. For some reason, I thought it was like a Revolutionary War soldier. Like that's kind of just like how I
yeah.
perceived him. It was just like a nice guy.
He
He
was
wasn't
just there.
creepy. He was just there.
Yeah.
He was just hanging out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if any of us will use it, but this is always the danger of having conversations with writers. But I do think "He Misses You" is a
Yeah.
great title for a ghost story.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I didn't even think of it as a title, but
That is a good title, though. Yeah.
it is a good title. Y'all can have it.
And have you had any like negative supernatural experiences, or they can be kind of supernatural adjacent, where you just get a vibe or an aura or an intuition about a place or a
Yeah. I mean,
person?
my Beacon Hill apartment was very bad energy. Like, also felt haunted, and like there was a presence there, but not a good one. That felt bad. Like from the moment I moved in, it felt bad. And yeah, I went house hunting 2 years ago, and I walked into a house and I was like, this feels bad. It wasn't like an old house or a creepy house or anything, but it's like everything in me was just like, and it was like a perfectly fine house. Like there was nothing about it that should have had me being like, mm. But it just did not feel good. And something weird did happen in that house. Um, like we walked through the whole house, and then we opened the door to the garage, and there was an old organ in the, like, not like a huge pipe organ, but an organ sitting in the garage. And my husband, when he was younger, had found an organ on the side of the road and like brought it home, and he was like, I think it was haunted. Like it was like bad vibes. I forget the story that he told me, but he had told me about finding an organ that he thought was haunted. And we opened the door to the garage and the organ was there, and he's like, I think that's the organ. I was like, I don't think he was joking. It's hard to tell with him. But yeah. So I don't know. Maybe there was a haunted organ in that house, or maybe my husband was pulling my leg. But it was definitely bad energy in that house. So like I'll have times like that where I'm just like, something about this space is wrong. But I don't even necessarily think that house was haunted. Like maybe the people who lived there were just really unhappy, you
Mm,
know, things like that. But I never had like you know, like I'm seeing a creature, like I'm seeing a ghost in the corner of my room experience or anything like that.
yeah,
Knock wood.
yeah, it's good that you get that intuition pretty instantaneously, because it would be very troubling to, buy the house and then get the energy a few weeks in. It's like, no, no,
Yeah.
this is financially not going to work.
Yeah.
But how about the Beacon Hill apartment? How long were you living there for?
For 2 semesters, so a little less than a year.
And when you find that that has bad energy, what's your response to that? What can you do when you find that there's bad energy, but it's also a place that you're living in?
I think there's probably things I could have done in retrospect, but like like I had a roommate who I was dear friends with, but like didn't gel as roommates. And um like I think if you bring good energy into the place, you can kind of balance it out. In retrospect, I probably should have done that, but um yeah, I'm sure there are things that you can do, unless it's like really cursed.
Yeah, yeah. Do you, if you felt that there was a presence and it was a more malevolent presence, would you try to engage with them? Would you try to talk to them and see, can we diffuse whatever's going on? Or would you be like,
Honestly,
no, I ain't talking to some
I
evil
probably would.
entity? Yeah,
It's
yeah.
probably bad, but like my nature is a little bit to be like, hey, how's it going? What's happened? Like I probably would try and, which is probably like sometimes that like I joke. I've joked about this before where I'm like, I don't think I could ever get possessed because the demon would be so fed up with me within like 10 minutes. They'd be like, they'd possess me and I'd be like somewhere in there, the tiny voice being like, how's it going? How are you liking it in here? Like, you can have dairy, but not too much dairy. Like, I just feel like any demon who tried to possess my body would be like, fuck this. Like, she's too high maintenance. So, but like, if I ever were to get possessed, it's because I would be engaging with a malevolent spirit. Like, is it something I did? Is it something I can do? Like, or is this candle okay? Do you prefer like an ambery scent? Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm too high maintenance for demonic possession, but like I definitely would open myself up to it by just being like, "Hey, spirit, like I'm sensing some animosity here. Is there anything we can do?"
You would lose the talk to me TikTok challenge. Yeah.
Yes,
But
yeah,
but but not by your own fault.
yeah,
You'd be like, no, they couldn't take it.
yeah. I feel like I'm like talk too much. Like if there's a sequel to Talk to Me, it's gonna be the demon that's like, stop talking to me.
Yeah. Uh, but your approach to like the in talking to an entity is so different than like on Ghost Adventures. Are you mad at someone? Did someone hurt you? And it's like, but you'd be like, hey, what's
I'd be like, hi,
happening?
are you mad at me? Is it something I did? Is there something I can do? Like I
Yeah.
just
Do you want something?
yeah, can I get you anything? I have
Yeah.
an assortment of teas. Like I yeah, that's I'm very needy and anxiety ridden and aim to please. So
Yeah, if this was mainstream journalism, then I think we've got the headline right there. I'm too high maintenance for demon possession. That has to be what you'd lead with.
yes.
But I mean, going back to Black Sheep, I understand that the writing process was a little different when compared to other novels that you've written. So I want to know both about the writing process, but then the genesis of the idea and how you started out with this one.
So I had a very high concept, and I feel like we'll get into spoilers in a little bit, but very high concept idea. And it just kind of came to me one day, um, probably as I was stewing in self loathing. And, and I had this like kind of punchy, like real log line idea. And then from there, I kind of built the story around it. And at the same time as when I came up with this idea, I was also, in many ways, this is a pandemic novel. I wrote it in 2022. I think I came up with the idea in 2021. I think we all had a lot of time to think during the pandemic, and I was thinking a lot about um, one, nature versus nurture, and I'm now the age my parents were in my earliest memories of them. And I also think as you get older and take on more responsibility and settle into your life, the more you kind of see you'll catch yourself in behaviors and be like, oh my God, I'm my parents. And like, it's weird. And, sometimes it's like, I get a sense of pride in being like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm like my dad. And then other times I'll be doing something. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like my dad. And I think we all kind of experience that. So I was kind of going through that. And then also there was just such a sense of hopelessness over these past few years. And I don't know. I mean, obviously things are pretty shitty, but I think just sitting on social media, a lot of us were just stewing at home and like only engaging with stuff online. And just feeling like every time I went online, everyone was like, the world is ending. This is the worst time to be alive. Everything sucks. This planet is on fire. We're all doomed. And me having to interrogate that for myself and being like, is it hopeless? Like, do I feel like there's no hope in humanity? And having to think about that, and seriously, like, ask myself if I have faith in people, if I have faith in goodness. And so this kind of storm of those things, along with this kind of like high concept idea, sort of was the storm that went into Black Sheep. And from there, I pitched it to my agent and my editor, and submitted an outline. The outline changed a lot in the writing process as I found Vesper, my protagonist's voice, but that's sort of how it all came to be.
And to go into what I consider a mild spoiler at about the 50-page mark, but I think, with retrospect, I should have seen it coming, but I somehow didn't. I mean, we start off, we know that Vesper is in a religious family, a kind of cult. We don't know what that cult is. The way that it's written, I would say there's pretty obvious misdirection for parallels with Christianity. Then you find out, oh, it's a satanic cult. So I want to know, did the story idea and critiquing religion as a whole come first, or did Satanism come first?
Satanism came first. And I don't really see the book as critiquing religion, as I'm asking questions about groups of people who believe 1,000% that they are right. I think watching January 6th happen, and to sit there and realize that these people believe that they're heroes, was really heartbreaking and disturbing and hard. Like, it was just hard for me to wrap my head around. And like this faith, like, how can people there's so many conspiracy theories online, and like watching, especially during the pandemic, people having all this time to fall into these rabbit holes, watching people fall into conspiracies, I think is people, who you don't think would buy into conspiracies, and then watching them buy into conspiracies, and the shock and heartbreak of losing them to that belief is really hard. And I think you talk to anybody and they know somebody who has fallen off some sort of deep end into a belief that, like, we know is wrong, but they don't think they're wrong. And so it wasn't like I sat down and I was like, I'm going to criticize Christianity, or I'm going to like go after organized religion. It was more about me really examining, like, how do we deal with groups of people who believe things that, like, we fundamentally disagree with, or like this world that we live in now where the truth has been so twisted and mangled that, like, some people don't recognize it when they see it. So it was more about that. And like, yes, they're Satanists, but the Satanism was a function of of something else. It wasn't about like me being like, I'm going to write about satanic cults. Like, I watched a documentary called Hail Satan, which is about, I believe it's called the Satanic Temple, which is a group that challenges organized religion in the US, and it's a great documentary and I highly recommend it. But like I was like totally on board with what they were doing. Like I don't want to, it's not a critique of Satanists. It's not a critique of anybody who puts their faith in anything. It's more of a like me being like, when does faith become dangerous and when does it become something good? Like when like where's that line between faith being something beautiful and worth having and faith being like a slippery slope to some dangerous stuff. So
Yeah, and I like that you did do it under the metaphor of Satanism, because obviously critiquing any sort of cult or group think is one of those things that we can't talk about, or that we have to talk about very carefully. But because so many people think, oh, Satanism bad, suddenly you can do it if you're putting it under that umbrella. But yeah, I certainly didn't come away thinking you hate Satanists. I thought this
yeah.
is just a perfect vehicle for talking about what you can't talk about.
Yeah, and I
Mhm.
wanted to make the Satanists very like fine. Like they're
Yeah.
all perfectly, for the most part, they're perfectly pleasant. They're just like nothing about them is strange or like weird really, like other than the what they believe in, and they do what they do because they believe. Other than that, they're all perfectly nice to Vesper. Welcome back. Pull up a chair, have a meal.
Yeah, it's not any different than what you see with religions that aren't Satanism. Religion. I mean, I grew up Catholic too. They do some weird stuff. Um, I mean, when you look at it outside, if you can step outside of it and go, what are they doing? And there's this ritual, and it's the Eucharistic Mass and all that, and it's like from an outsider, they're like, what is this?
Yeah.
And so they're doing what they believe in. It's a totally different take on Satanism, and it had that. I mean this as a compliment. It reminded me of the work of Ira Levine, because he had this. You have these Satanists living next door to Rosemary and Rosemary's Baby, especially in the film, you have Ruth Gordon, and she's knocking on the door. Rosemary, I gotta get
Yeah.
this thing, and they're just like the sweetest people that you'd ever meet. You'd want to hang out with these people, you know, and then you find out that they're Satanists. And that's like the one thing, and I
Yeah.
love the way that you did that. I mean, and I know, talking about the book, when I hit that page, I was reading in bed. I went into the book cold. I'm reading in bed, and it was like when I was talking earlier. It was like I was at that point where I was about to, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and go to sleep and everything. And I hit those two words. They're like, big spoiler here, hell Satan. Uh, I read that, and I'm like, wait, did I miss something? Did I blink? Let me go up a couple sentences, and I read it again, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get my glasses on straight. Let's get the pillow propped up here, and I'm like, okay, I'm I was already in, but I'm in deep now, and I just kept going, and I was like, holy shit, this is not. I mean, it blindsided me, and of course, like what Michael was saying, in retrospect, it's like, whoa, man, I should have seen it coming, you know. But that's the beauty. That's the beauty of writing, is that you don't realize the foreshadowing until you got to the shadow.
Yeah, and I worked hard to keep it off jacket like I was like, let's keep it off jacket copy. Like I don't want to, like I really wanted to avoid talking about it because I do think it's a fun surprise.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, like the little page breaks are pentagrams, and like the sheep has devil horns on the red eyes on the cover.
Yeah.
So like there's like little signs there that I was like, is that too much? Are people going to pick up on it? But I was pleased that people seem to be. And I tried not to talk about the Satanism in early interviews and stuff like that. I mean, the book's been out for a while now, so. But yeah, I wanted the experience to be exactly your experience, to be like, wait, what?
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah, I was kicking myself because I mean, you've even got a character called Rosemary. It's like, how did I not see this? I mean, it could have only been more obvious if it was called Black Goat. It
Yeah.
was one animal away from really hitting me over the head with it. And well, the fact that like the pentagrams, Rosemary, and Black Sheep didn't do it for me. Maybe even if it had been called Black Goat, I'd have been like, oh, Satan. But goodness, yeah, so well done. And of course there's another reveal. I don't know if we will get into that one. And I didn't even see that one coming until it was very close to coming. And it's like, she's done it again. How am I not seeing these things? But I guess as well, I mean, maybe that's testament as well to how much, I mean, it was about religion. And as you say, it wasn't at the same time. It was about nature versus nurture. It was about family dynamics. So I guess I was so enthralled in the rest of the story that I didn't see the satanic
Mhm.
elements coming in. But I mean, we were talking about, January 6th, and I guess the pandemic was such a time for people to almost go down the conspiracy theorist rabbit hole. And I mean, I used to think naively and wrongly that as we had the internet and we had access to more information, that there would be more truth, there would be less division, we would have access to truth and reality and facts. But actually, it feels like it's the opposite. It
It's the
feels like the
opposite.
more information we have, the more confusing things become. And, then you start asking, well, whose narrative can you trust? And if so many people get it so wrong, sometimes you have to ask, well, what am I getting wrong? What
Yeah.
am I believing that might not be true? Do you have battles like this yourself?
I but like I feel like I have a pretty good ability to be like, this seems true to me, but like it's it's so shaky. It's like, just because I think it's true does it mean it's true? Like, I think that questioning happened, like, for the past few years. It's become easier to be like, do I know what's true, and where am I getting my information from, and can I trust these sources? And um, so we can have confidence up to a certain extent, but I don't know if we can ever, like, unless we completely cross our T's, dot our I's, do deep dive, like, it's hard to speak confidently about anything anymore, because you see one thing on the internet and you can't really form an opinion because you've only seen one thing on the internet.
Right. And it seems that, for the smartest and the most articulate, I mean, they can make a persuasive case or something that at a surface level, it's like, well, yeah, I could see how that's plausible. It's like this person is trying to trick us because of X, Y, Z, and but I feel we have to believe something, or we have to take some things to be true, or we may literally go insane and not and then just live in a state of distrust. So there have to be some things we believe until substantial evidence that they're not true
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. And I think I explored a lot of that through Vesper in Black Sheep because she sort of has this ability to be like, she's very confident in her self and in her belief system. And like, I, she's the character I've written who's the most different from me in how she's able to make these hard decisions of like, I don't believe what these people believe. That's like, I'm going to trust my own compass and I'm going to go. And I really admire that about Vesper. And I'm somebody who, like, anytime I watch a cult documentary, I'm always watching it like, would I have bought into this? Like, because I'm susceptible. I'm very, like, if I'm sitting across from somebody and they're telling me something, I want to believe what they're saying is true. Like, I'm kind of easily swayed, not so much by online stuff, but like if I'm sitting next to somebody and they're telling me a story, I'll probably like I'm inclined to believe what they're telling me. Like I have a lot of like I love people. I want to trust people. And knowing that makes me vulnerable is kind of a weird thing because you'd think maybe that would be a virtue of being open. So like if I if I was little and nobody told me that like not to take candy from strangers, if a stranger offered me candy, I'd be like, wow, thank you so much. Like that's just kind of who I am. So it was an exploration of like writing Vesper was like what would it be like to be somebody who can make up their mind and like stick to their guns and kind of trust themselves and like rely on their own like true north.
Yeah, and to be writing as a protagonist who is so different to yourself, and to also be writing about someone in their early 20s. I mean, did that take quite a shift? And what kind of things did you have to do to get yourself into the Vesper mindset?
So it was difficult because I Vesper was a tricky protagonist because she's tied into the concept, the high concept I had for the book. I needed the right person to tell that story and to fit into that. Like, it's kind of a big mantle to fill. And so I needed the perfect protagonist. It took me a while to kind of find the right voice, and I write first person, so the voice needed to be right. And I was talking to my agent about it, and she was like, "Well, what if she worked at like a chain restaurant?" And that's when I was like, yes, done. And that's when I came up with Shorty's, which is like an American, like TGI Fridays, Applebee's kind of chain restaurant. And like putting her there, just like that's how I met her. And like as soon as I met her, it was completely easy to get into them. Like once I met her, she was there and she showed up. It took me a while to meet her, but once she arrived fully formed. And she's like, it's me. I'm here. So I think I usually have an knock wood. I have an okay time finding my protagonist. Like I love writing first person. I love meeting my protagonists, but they've always like for my first 3 books, they kind of just arrived and I didn't need to look for them. Vesper like hid from me for a while. But when she did arrive, boy, did she
Yeah,
arrive.
yeah. Was there initial panic when, she wasn't there and you're looking
Yeah.
for her? Because, this is territory that you've not been in before.
Yeah, definitely. For my first 3 books, I had written them before I sold them. So I was writing the books. I wasn't like pitching them and then writing them. Like I was sitting down and writing them. So as I came up with a concept, the character was there at the same time. This one, I came up with the concept, pitched it. They were like, okay, go write it. And then I like went to write it. And I was like, oh shit, like where's my protagonist? So yeah, there was definitely initial panic. And I wrote a draft of it with a Vesper who didn't work. Um, so yeah, it was tough to find, like, characteristically she made herself, she was difficult to pin down, but um thankfully it was just that I needed shorties to go to shorties to meet her.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because you never know what's gonna make that character come out.
Yeah.
And that's me. I mean, I can think of great ideas and form a story, but I typically can't write anything until I start hearing their voices,
Yeah.
and I have to hear them talk to me. And it's usually when I'm not even thinking about it. And, I'll hear somebody have a conversation or something like that, overhear something, and it will springboard from there. But that voice is so important, um, because it helps you with having that momentum
Yeah.
to get these characters. And I'm writing, I've I've done some first person. I love the way that you do it. Um, you kind of do it in a way that seems very unrestrained. Because you hear like you have the middle of school. Hey, you want bury your eyes, all that to where um, and that can make the sentences a lot more dynamic. But sometimes it's like you just gotta go. You gotta go, you know. And if you're telling the story, and if you're writing it well enough, then you're not going to sit there and focus on how many eyes you actually see on the page. It doesn't
Mm.
matter, you know. So I liked it. I felt it was it flowed. It was very unrestrained. Everything fit together. It was great writing. It's inspiring me to do something in first person.
It's fun. Get into character. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we like to get into the specifics of writing. So I want to know, what does your writing routine look like? What does a typical working day look like for you?
So I feel like I'm best in the morning. So I usually get up and try and get writing around by 6:30, and then I will write until mid-morning, go for a walk, move my body. I will eat lunch, and then I'll come sit, work through the afternoon, and then around 4 o'clock, 4:30, get up, move again. Um, and sometimes I will, depending if I'm on a deadline, I'll work again at night. But I kind of treat it like a 9 to 5. But I definitely have to like get up and move and leave my desk um, at multiple points throughout the day. But yeah, it's pretty much my routine.
And do you work on one project at a time, or do you ever have
Yes.
multiple on the go?
I usually, because I write like close first person and like kind of get into
Mm.
character, I really try to, and I like, if I'm working on something, I like to be consumed by it. I like to get momentum. So I typically try and just work on one thing at a time. Um, Occasionally, I will have, like this past year, I had to write stories for anthologies. So nights and weekends, I'd work on those. But typically, I really admire people who can work on multiple projects at a time. But even for me, like if I have to stop and work on copy edits and then go back, like it's difficult for me to leave one project and then jump back into another project, especially because of the first person, um, how deep I get into that first person character.
Well, on that note, when you submit something to your editor and they're working on the copy edits, what are you doing in that time when they're working on it?
So usually, kind of the cycle I'm on. Sometimes I'll write a short, depending. Like if I have a fair amount of time, like if I'm submitting a novel and waiting to get like first round of edits, I'll work on stories, um, short stories, or I'll like when I now I've my edits, my first round of edits on my next book or with my editor, I'll work on the pitch for my next book. So I'll usually have some kind of short project to come in between, or if I have a lot of like blurb reading to do, I'll like be like, okay, I'm gonna take this week, knock out these, like I'm gonna read. So I fill my time.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, what does your blurb reading look like? Have you got some kind of hard rules so that you just don't get inundated with blurb requests?
I I love blurbing. I love reading blurb books. But like last year, I had a spread. Like I had to come up with a spreadsheet, and like I blurbed like it was like over 30 books last year, and now I'm like I'm gonna have to start. Like I've had to start saying no, which breaks my heart because I hate saying no to blurbs. But um, yeah, it did get to the point where it was like if I have to like have this spreadsheet like it's probably too much at the moment, so I'm probably going to try and I get this weird place where I'm ahead on reading but also behind on reading. Like my TBR pile is just like I don't know, I'm a type A Virgo. I like the TBR pile really gets to me, so I it it messes me up that like people are like, have you read this book? And I'm like, no, but I've read this amazing book that comes out 6 months from now. Like it's tricky. I love to do it. But yeah, I used to be like, I will say yes to everything. And now I'm like, that's not possible anymore.
Yeah, and given you've told us how much of your day is consumed with writing, given that you're also married, so you have a relationship to maintain, when is the reading time?
Usually at night, I'll usually read like 8 to 9 or something, and then I'll watch some stupid TV to lull myself to sleep from 9 to 10, and then I'm a early to bed, early to rise.
It's impressive that you're effectively reading 1 hour a day and still managing to blurb 30 books per year and presumably also reading for pleasure.
The reading for pleasure kind of suffers a little
Uh,
bit, but I try and read for an hour every day.
mm,
Sometimes I'll go through phases where I'm just like, I, I mean, if I have a physical book, it's easier for me to read. But if it's on like, if I'm in the thick of editing or if I'm in like the thick of drafting and I have a digital book, sometimes I can't. Sometimes I'm like, I cannot hold my computer anymore. So um, then I will just I don't want to sound like too much of a hero. Like I don't do it every day. I try to, but some days I just like watch shit TV and fall
yeah,
asleep in front of the
yeah.
couch.
Sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Nicole Neely via Patreon, and she says, I loved The Return. It was a great setup of a psychological thriller, an excellent bam surprise horror. What are some of your favorite tropes in your current novels and future projects?
Huh. Tropes. I guess I mean the book I'm working on now sort of became a like sexy vampire book. So, which is not like a trope. I wanted to write a vampire book and then it kind of turned into this. And like now I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I like this. It's like I never read Interview with the Vampire or anything, but now I'm into it. Um, I don't know. I love monsters. I love like all the any classic trope, any classic monster, like trying to take it and do something a little bit different with it. It's kind of my favorite thing. Like I'm very like if it's like a haunted house, yes, give it to me. Like and any like how can I come up with my own take on it? Like with this book I'm working on now, vampires. Like what can I do with vampires to make them mine? Werewolves. What can I do with a werewolf to make it mine? Witches. Like what? And then, the haunted hotel. What can I do with that? So I like to, I love the genre so much. I love just like plucking monsters, plucking these classic horror tropes, like out and trying to figure out what I can do to them to make them mine, which sounds selfish, but it's fun. And if I'm not
Yeah.
having fun writing, no one's going to have fun reading it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And in terms of the current work in progress, I understand it is called So Thirsty,
yes.
and you've pitched it as Thelma and Louise with vampires. So
Yes.
is this the next book that will be coming out from you?
Yes.
And tell us more about it if you can.
So I don't know when it's coming out. I should know within the next few weeks. We should have a date. But it is about a woman named Sloane who's about to turn 36 and is kind of feeling stuck in her life and unsatisfied and sort of resigned herself to kind of living with a husband that their relationship is fine, maybe not so good, and she's kind of accepted her circumstances. And she goes on a birthday trip with her best friend Naomi, who's like a free spirit, who's kind of the opposite. She's of Sloane. She's wild. She's like likes to get in trouble. She likes to shake things up. Um, and Naomi has tried to give Sloane the space to figure her shit out and is kind of sick of watching Sloane be passive and makes plans with a stranger for a kind of impromptu party. And the night goes a little bit south and their lives change forever, forever, forever. So, but yeah, I couldn't write a vampire book called So Thirsty without a little bit of sexiness and a little bit of intrigue, and sort of how things take off is a bit road trippy, a bit Thelma and Louise, a lot of trouble, a lot of blood, classic hijinks.
Well, I mean, I can't wait to read it. I know
Mhm.
that Bob can't wait to read it because, as you're describing it, it's like this is exactly the type of thing that's in his wheelhouse. And well, hopefully, we'll get to read it sooner rather than later, and we'll have to get you back on the podcast to talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
it.
This is my first time like talking about it, so hopefully it was a good. I mean, I feel like the Thelma and Louise with vampires is like a pretty solid, easy pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
As soon
yeah.
as you said that, I was like, well, okay, I'm in. I'm in.
Yeah. And you said we should have some news on that by the end of the year, so we might know when
Yeah,
it's
I
coming out.
think they're supposed. I think I should have a date soon. Maybe a pre-order link before the end of the year. So
Very
All
nice
right.
indeed. Looking forward to it. Well, what is something that you should be kinder to yourself about?
um, gosh, we talk so much about this in the first half of the show. I think generally I've gotten better at being kinder to myself about things. But maybe not getting to my not getting to my TBR or when I watch TV not feeling when I take a break from doing something that I should be doing, not feeling so guilty about it.
Yeah, it's easier said than done,
Yeah.
but yeah. Well, what do you hope that people say about you when you're not in the room?
Oh, oh my gosh. That question. Um she's fun. In like a nice way. I feel like that could be like, well, she's fun. Like I hope people like I want to be like a fun, positive presence. If I meet people, I want people to have fun reading my books. I want people to have fun hanging out with me. I like people. When I leave my writing cave, I want to have fun and I want to be
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. Well, you've certainly exuded fun and positivity in this conversation.
Oh,
So I
good.
think people who are listening are certainly going to have got that from you. So I'm sure that is what people say about you.
I hope so.
Well, thank you so much for spending the vast majority of your evening chatting with us. This has been amazing, and we definitely have to do it again sometime because there are so many of your books that we haven't even spoke about. We haven't spoke about The Return or Such Sharp Teeth, so there is every opportunity and reason to do it again if you'd like.
Of course. Yeah, anytime.
All right. Well, where can our listeners connect with you?
My website is rachel-harrison.com, and I'm on Instagram and TikTok and Threads at Rachel Harrison's Ghost.
Nice. I like it. Rachel Harrison's Ghost. All right. Do you have any final thoughts to leave our listeners with?
Well, we talked a lot about, you know, negative self talk and, you know, being kinder to yourself. And I just hope the takeaway from this episode is for people to be kind to themselves, take care of themselves, and um, have faith for a good future, for good things.
All
I hope
right.
that for everybody listening.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
Mhm.